Polished rice came in only after 1960s or so. Now we love rice, the whiter the better. Unfortunately, fiber and also micronutrients gets removed in polishing. So what we are left in a white rice is only starch. Replaced, let us say, that's one more myth. People think that if I can't eat sugar, I can take Jaggery, which is wrong. Jaggery also gives the same glucose load as sugar does.
So let's say you make a 90
grams, you can make roughly 3 chapatis.
Minimum 25 grams of fiber per day.
Dr. B. Sesikeran is one of India's most respected voices in nutrition science.
With over 3 decades of research, he has shaped how the nation understands
balanced diets, proteins, fats, and everyday food choices.
Milk is truly pro-inflammatory, or is it okay to consume?
We shouldn't really be alarmed about milk causing any kind of an pro-inflammation. Go back to traditional kind of our foods, region specific. Make sure you're physically active. Even if you're an elderly who cannot move out of the house, you could still do a little bit of physical activity inside your homes. I think people should, number one is...
Dr. B. Sesikeran is a veteran nutrition scientist and public health expert and former director of the National Institute of Nutrition, ICMR.
He's an expert panel member for the dietary guidelines and decades of experience shaping evidence-based nutrition guidance, food policy, and dietary recommendations in India. This podcast simplifies nutrition science into practical, real-world insights, helping people understand how everyday food choices impact long-term health. Let's dive deep into it. This is my mission where we bring high-quality guests to provide credible medical information. So right off the bat, I'm just going to ask you, people are talking a lot about protein, doctor. How common is protein deficiency among Indian community?
See, actually protein deficiency, not measured in clinical terms, but in terms of how much of protein people are actually consuming against what is recommended for a daily intake. Those kind of studies have shown that most of our people are barely reaching 50 to 70% of the recommended daily intake of protein. So most of the protein in our population is coming from cereal sources. And because we consume almost 250 grams of cereal in a day, which gives almost around 20 grams of protein. But
when you say cereal,
I mean rice, wheat. And these are the two components. And to a smaller extent, only millets. Most of them are rice and wheat only. And since there is little bit of protein in that, since the bulk of the food comes from that, the protein content is significantly coming from cereals. The next, of course, is pulses is the main good source. We recommend something like 80 grams per day, which will give around 20 to 25 grams of protein. But the actual intakes are barely 40 grams. The reasons could be many. Above all, affordability is also an issue because it's an expensive commodity. But more than anything else is the lack of awareness that that's a good source of protein, that pulses and legumes. And then, of course, is milk.
Are they good source of protein?
Pulses and legumes are good source of protein. They almost have around 30 to 40% is protein in them. Some of them, like soya, have got very good quality of protein. And then milk. In fact, India is the topmost milk producer in the world. See, the per capita milk availability in our country is around 450 ml. The recommended daily intake of milk is around 300 ml, either as milk or as curd or any dairy product. If they take that 300 ml, you get something like 10 to 12 grams of protein. And it's a good quality protein compared to a vegetarian source of protein. But the actual milk intakes, even among the milk producers, is barely 100 to 120 ml. When recommendation is 300 ml. So there's again a shortfall of protein there. Then, of course, poultry and meat and all that among the non-vegetarians are there. And some amount of protein also comes from vegetables and from other sources. So if you put all these together, you'll find that per daily intake should be around 40 to 50 grams of protein. And people are barely taking 25 to 30 grams if you put all this together. Most of it is coming from cereals. That way, our protein intake is deficient. But if you look at, frankly, how many people actually have overt clinical protein deficiency, you may not see many. So that's how it is. So definitely proteins need to improve. And since we basically are people who have a relatively higher body fat composition and less of muscle. There's a need, therefore, to improve our protein intakes to sort of reverse the whole thing. So increase the muscle needs that protein. So that way, I think protein is a macronutrient, which people really, till recently, they have not given much importance to that.
So, 2 points that you mentioned. One is the soybean and the other one is the milk.
Yeah.
I want to touch upon soybean. So people, soybean is a very complete protein.
Correct.
It contains all the essential amino acids. And amino acids can be divided into two, essential and non-essential. Non-essential is something that your body produces. Essential is something that your body does not produce. And that is why you should take it through the dietary intake.
Right.
Soybean is one of a vegetarian source of protein where it is a complete source of amino acids. Why is there a small hesitancy in using soy, especially among Indian population?
See, soy has got one is its taste is not acceptable to many of our Indian tongue. So it's because it has got some amount of omega-3 in it, and it gives a little bit of a sour or a fishy kind of a taste. And soy also is a thing which has to be properly processed because it's got anti-nutrients as part of the ingredients. And but when properly cooked or soaked and cooked or fermented, etc., even those anti-nutrients go away. There are also been a misconception because there are certain isoflavones in soy, like denzine and adenosine and daidzein. And these are supposed to have an estrogen-like structure and considered to have an estrogen-like action. So there has been a lot of misconception which can actually affect the puberty in the adolescent, and that it may promote breast cancer, or it can cause abnormal uterine bleeding and all that. So these are all misnomers because they think because it's estrogen, so it has estrogen-like action. Actually, it has an estrogen-like structure, but it binds to a totally different set of receptors. There are two types of estrogen receptor, ER1 and ER2. This binds to ER2 receptor, which doesn't have an estrogen-like action. On the contrary, it has a agonistic action in the sense that in osteoporosis, when hormone estrogen is low in menopausal women, these isoflavones actually bind to the receptors and increase the bone formation. And therefore, they have an exact opposite effect. Now, even in breast cancer, etc., they have shown that it exactly has a beneficial effect, primarily because it binds to a different kind of a receptor, even though it looks like an estrogen. But people have, due to misconception, are told it has estrogen-like substance, it is not good for young people or children, etc. And therefore, it wasn't that popular. It was also recently shown that not everybody who consumes soya will have the entire benefit of the isoflavone because that again depends upon the gut bacterial population. The genistein actually gets converted to another thing called equal, and the equal is the actual active ingredient. And it is found that in Asians and especially East Asians, the equal production is higher than in the Western population. So one of the reasons they say that many of the benefits of the soy isoflavones is not seen in studies done in the West, but you see them in the East, with like Chinese, Koreans, and Asians and all. Well, we have that kind of bacteria which activate these isoflavones. So soy has got many advantages, but it should be properly processed and it shouldn't be eaten raw and half cooked, etc. Then you will have a lot of abdominal discomfort because of anti-nutrients. But as you rightly said, among the vegetarian proteins, soy is a complete protein. It's the nearest to milk. If you look at we have what is a value called as PDCAS value, which takes into account the amino acids present, essential amino acids as you mentioned, and also the digestibility. A protein which has got all the essential amino acids but doesn't get completely digested will have less of an advantage. Soy protein that way has all the amino acids and also a digestibility which is high. So the PDCAS value is around 0.95 compared to milk, which is 1. Whereas if you take the PDCAS of many other legumes, there will be around 0.8 or 0.7, like between 70% less digestible, 80% digestible. That's how our plant proteins are less digestible compared to these animal sources of protein. And therefore, we need to either process them to make it more digestible. And also our diet should have a combination of both cereals as well as pulses so that you get all the amino acids. So 2 issues, see that everybody gets all the essential amino acid, and number 2 is see that it is digestible. Then it really doesn't matter whether it's plant or animal protein.
So the discussion, what you are emphasizing is that soy is a good thing to take. And what is the relation between soy and hypothyroidism interfering with the thyroxine absorption?
So there has been a lot of the research going on this. There are some studies which did show that they have an anti-thyroid-like action. But there are many large clinical trials also have shown at the levels at which we normally consume is unlikely to affect the thyroid. Iodine uptakes may be affected in some of the studies, but not in at the usual levels of soy intake.
In a meta-analysis and a review study that I have read, the isoflavones in soy is not the same. You're talking about the gut bacteria, but actual content of isoflavone is also not the same in the Western population compared to the Eastern.
That probably depends upon the soil in which it is grown.
Correct.
Those differences will always be there. See, even within our country, depends on the region where a particular crop is grown, the agroclimatic zones and conditions, the active molecule expression will vary. That's one of the reasons Ayurveda is always says you must source a plant in a particular place at a particular temperature in a particular season. Only then you will get its benefit, which is 100% true. Same will be happening here too. But now it's not just the content, it's a question of conversion in the gut. Is what now has been proven as the reason why there's a difference between soy in the Western population versus soy among the Eastern Asian population.
So if a person listening to this podcast, if they want to increase their protein intake, they can include soybean as one of the source.
Yes.
And in addition to the pulses and legumes, and not having soybean as a only source of protein.
Absolutely. They need not change their basic dietary. Even let us say the tur dal which we consume, or in the south, or the rajma or the chole kind of legumes which are consumed, all of them have a very good complement of amino acid, except one of them will be missing in them. But if you combine them with either rice or roti, you will get all the amino acids, and they are also fairly digestible in the way we cook in India. We soak them and then we steam them or pressure cook them. All the anti-nutrients will go away, the bioavailability gets better.
So compared to plant protein, animal protein is better digestible?
It is 100% digestible. So because there you don't have fiber. So most of the plant proteins, the protein is also mingling with fiber. So the digestibility is a little lesser than the other one.
So that's why the bioavailability is slightly lower for plant-based protein.
Plant-based protein compared to animal proteins.
Is that clinically significant?
It depends. See, let's say I'm exclusively a plant food eater. I don't even take milk. Now, I will have, let us say, a plant protein digestibility of about 70%. There are ways of increasing that. Either I increase my total intake of protein by another 30%, if possible, or I process the protein which I eat. You process it so that the proteins become smaller units, and then they get better digested. So there are 2 ways of improving that.
So I have always practiced, and also I have taught my patients as well, that 80% have been plant-based.
Yes.
20% I go animal-based.
Yeah.
And the main reason is that when I go 80% plant-based, the fiber requirement gets met easily.
Yes.
So based on our discussion over here, if somebody listening to this podcast, they can say that maybe we can combine not only animal and plant together. Among plants itself, different sources of protein you combine.
Absolutely. Diversity is the best solution for getting the goodness of every plant source of protein. Each one is different from the other. So the amino acid content also, one may be high, one may be low. For example, soy scores over the other legumes because the methionine content is little higher than the others. Okay, so that is how soy has got a more complete than the other legumes where methionine is little lower. But you could always combine a little bit of milk or curd along with your rotis or whatever. So you get the goodness of the protein from the cereal as well as from the milk source.
Milk source. Okay. So tofu, it comes from soy.
Yes.
Why that has not been picked up in Indian community that much?
That's because we have been used to paneer.
Paneer.
So paneer has been our staple especially in northern India. Now even in south we use a lot of paneer. And tofu is you have to develop a taste for that. It's got a slight beany taste and it's much softer. But in terms of the quality of the protein, it is pretty good, and it is a vegetarian source of protein. So it's slowly catching up. It's a question of how traditional habits have been in our country. Since soy was not traditionally a main ingredient among our legumes, and it has not found its place. But now, since it's also grown extensively in our country, it is very sad that most of our soy grown is actually going for poultry feed rather than for human use.
Oh, is that right?
So it sort of indirectly comes to us through the poultry meat. But otherwise, we should be using a good amount of soy.
Soy. So the next controversial question to you. Tofu versus paneer. Which one will you choose?
If I'm a vegetarian, I would choose tofu. And of course, paneer is traditionally known is very difficult for people to avoid paneer. But paneer also has fat. So you should realize that it is a milk product made by a process in which apart from protein, it also has a good amount of fat, whereas tofu is not. Tofu is almost entirely only vegetable protein.
And tofu has some fiber in it as well.
Yes.
Because it's a vegetable protein, and paneer has no fiber, and the fat content can increase the calorie intake
in the paneer.
In the paneer. That brings a question to milk. So you said milk is a good quality protein, but few evidence and also few people in the podcast, they came on board and they said that milk is considered as pro-inflammatory now. So that brings up a question whether milk is truly pro-inflammatory or is it okay to consume? Can you just clarify?
Actually, there's been in between a lot of discussion on the milk protein quality in terms of pro-inflammatory and non-inflammatory actions. They call that as the A1 protein. It's basically a slight difference in the amino acid composition of the casein, which is present in the protein, and that was linked to a pro-inflammatory effect. And therefore, there is another breed of cattle in which the casein protein is A2 casein, which does not have this action. And what is good to know is our entire native Indian cows and all our buffaloes all produce A2 milk. And therefore, we shouldn't really be alarmed about milk causing any kind of an pro-inflammation. And in addition to that, nobody need to actually take milk as milk. You can consume milk as curd, yogurt, or buttermilk, etc. There are various other fermented versions of milk where you have tremendous health advantages. And fermented milk has been, even traditional Ayurveda, is also considered as a good vehicle for many of the medicines which they used to give. Simply because in fermented one you have no lactose. So people who have lactose intolerance also won't have that problem. And second, the protein is also more digestible, and therefore you don't have these issues like inflammation and so on.
There was a very, very beautiful explanation on the milk aspect. When I was drinking milk in the US, I started having abdominal bloating. So I changed to A2 milk. And the bloating got better. Is that something that you recommend if they have any symptoms like that?
Not India, there's no issue, as I mentioned. So India, most of it is the Indian cow milk or the buffalo milk. Only the Jersey crossbred cows which were there in India were actually producing this A1 milk. All our milk was only A2. And therefore these issues never came up.
Okay.
In fact, many people now make false claims saying that A2 ghee, for example. It doesn't matter. Ghee is only fat. There's no protein in it.
Right.
So it doesn't matter whether A1 or A2. But then people make such claims because there's awareness among people saying that A2 is good, A1 is bad. So people are falsely marketing with this claim, but I can assure you that Indian dairy is almost entirely A2.
A2.
So there's no need for any kind of such claims as though something special is being given.
I see. So what is your take on buffalo milk?
Buffalo milk is fine. It has a little higher fat content than cow's milk. It is in fact a very good source of milk in terms of the milk protein or calcium, etc. And we have quite a good number of them in our country.
Right.
So it's only there are some traditional views about cow's milk and buffalo's milk. And other than that, scientifically, buffalo's milk is pretty good, but for the higher fat content.
Higher fat content. Calorie content is slightly on the higher side.
Higher.
That brings the next question. I mean, I'm getting so many questions. So, your take on ghee. And before that, let me tell you what I am thinking. So, ghee is a source of saturated fat. And we will have to limit saturated fat more than 10% of your total calories. But at the same time, you will need some kind of healthy fat balance. With this kind of, especially in India, there's always a confusion that, either ghee, some people think that ghee is extremely good and some people think ghee is extremely bad. And when I say that, you balance it out, they are not able to clearly understand, okay, how much I should use, what I should do and everything. How should we clarify this? What is your take on this?
As you rightly mentioned, it's a question of what amount of saturated fat one needs to take. Now, we actually have total recommendation of oils and fats, visible oils and fats, is around 25 grams per day, of which 1/3 is from each of the saturated, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. So roughly comes from 8 to maximum 10 grams of saturated fat per day. Saturated fat is also essential in the body. In fact, we do need saturated fat, especially many of the brain lipids are basically saturated fat, and most of our cell membranes actually have saturated fat. And therefore, it's not that we should totally avoid saturated fat. We could take, but to a smaller extent. And then ghee has been traditionally providing that level of saturated fat. Because imagine we were mostly a vegetarian diet. We are only taking maximum only milk. So in that, the saturated fat from the milk was being transformed into a commodity called ghee. And ghee, because of this flavorfulness, and it also has some amount of monounsaturated fat, and a large number of bioactive molecules are there in this ghee, which comes from the milk itself. So ghee in small quantities, a small half a teaspoon or a teaspoon of it goes into our diet, should do no harm. So it is not to be considered as something which should avoid. But definitely in larger quantities, it is after all saturated fat. It has cardiovascular risks associated with it. So the quantity is what is very important in ghee. Otherwise, it's not a bad fat.
What is the common practice that you see in your patients or also among Indian community with ghee that you wish they change?
Usually the people use very little ghee at home. But under certain occasions, they sort of binge on that. They use everything. They use a lot of ghee. And there's also a false notion that if any kind of sweet or whatever is made, you see advertisements saying pure ghee and so on. So ghee that way could be overindulged in the form of food commodities rather than actually adding in the kitchen. Kitchen use of ghee is still fairly moderate. Nobody adds too much. But when it comes to any preparation, sometimes, particularly on certain occasions, they use a lot more ghee. And that will add to a higher saturated fat load. And if we constantly consume it, the saturated fat will keep getting accumulated in the body and cause various other problems.
Yeah. So I want to ask about protein intake, again, coming back to it. People started talking about protein intake, and then, the 0.8 grams to 1 gram per kilogram of protein intake has been repeatedly emphasized. And the recent dietary guidelines from the US have even increased that to 1.2 grams per kilogram.
Correct.
Your take on that?
Yeah. In fact, we have calculated protein intakes on people with physical activity levels of sedentary and moderate activity. We are not using too much of your muscle. And there you need protein for calculated based on the protein losses in our body and how much protein is required for all our enzymes, our secretions, our hormones, etc. All internal metabolic reasons. The calculation is 0.8 grams or actually 0.83 grams per kg body weight should be more than adequate for almost 99% of the population. In fact, 50% of the population will do good even with 0.6 grams, what we call as estimated average requirement. But you want a recommended dietary allowance is useful for almost all the population, it is 0.8 grams. But that would again be for a moderate activity. But if somebody is physically very active, he does a lot of hard work, more muscle is being used, or a young man who's working out in the gym who wants to build more muscle, or a sports person who regularly was running or weightlifting, etc. He needs muscle strength. They need more protein. And there we can go up to 1 or 1.2 grams. And even up to 2 grams people are permitted where you are doing intensive amount of physical activity. For the general population with moderate amount of physical activity, 0.8 grams should be sufficient.
And there is a caveat in that, sir, that now the recommendation will increase to 1.2 grams. Let's say an average healthy person is increasing the protein intake, but they are not corresponding that with good amount of activity. Then the extra protein could be converted into fat or even increased calories. That may be detrimental down the road for that particular patient per se. How will you manage that?
In fact, the extra protein, let us say it is from, if most of the protein gets 100%, non-vegetarian source of protein get 100% digested, okay. So they go into the amino acid pool and then they stimulate muscle synthesis. But there is not sufficient need for muscle synthesis because of a decreased amount of activity. These amino acids will get excreted. It is excreted through the urine. And then if at all any organ which is going to first be stressed, it will be the kidney. So we assume that people will have normal kidney function and therefore their consumption of the high protein will not do them much harm. But as you said, it could also get converted into the other components.
Macros.
And then it also gives again another 4 calories comes from protein as well.
Correct.
So the energy intake goes up. So excessive amount of protein in the long run may actually harm the kidney because of the higher amount of nitrogen being excreted. And in the immediate term, it will add to your energy consumption.
Okay.
But if you consume large amount of protein, you have one advantage is that a person consuming high amount of protein will consume less amount of carbohydrate calories because satiety will always occur. So the total energy intake may not go so much. So even though you're getting calories from protein, you would have eaten less calories from carbohydrates.
Correct.
So the total energy intake won't be much.
Correct.
So that will sort of balance out. We need not worry about the total energy intake coming through protein. Worry more about whether the excess protein is good for your kidneys or not.
Okay. So moving on to carbs, as you said. So carbs, the main thing that I always emphasize is the simple carbs, complex carbs. So focus on complex carbs a lot, mainly because of the fiber content. So please educate the audience. There are 2 kinds of fiber, soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Can you educate us on those 2?
Exactly. You take, for example, the wheat. Okay, wheat provides almost around 1/3 of the fiber intake per day will come if you take sufficient amount of wheat. And of that, you have the fiber will be around 2/3 will be insoluble fiber, and 1/3 will probably be soluble fiber. The insoluble fiber is mostly like cellulose kind of lignin and cellulose kind of material, which goes into the body and absorbs moisture. Okay, because it absorbs moisture, it gives bulk to the stools, and therefore it is good for bowel movement, and therefore constipation risk comes down. Particularly in older people where constipation is more often a problem. A bulky stool is always an advantage, and this insoluble fiber is found to be beneficial in that way. Coming to soluble fiber forms a gel-like substance. And then what it sort of lines the absorptive surface of the intestine. And thereby it slows down the absorption of several nutrients, mostly glucose and also fats. And therefore it is good for our health in the sense it's anything which has got soluble fiber. You'll probably have a lower GI or glycemic value because the sugar goes in little slower. And even cholesterol containing foods also, they say that if you consume along with a lot of soluble fiber, the cholesterol uptake into the body also will be less. So soluble fiber has one more advantage is it becomes the food for the gut bacteria. So when it gets into the large intestine, the gut bacteria then ferment or grow on this soluble fiber and produce several beneficial molecules like short-chain fatty acids. And these short-chain fatty acids are necessary for maintaining the integrity of the inner lining of our intestine, what is called as the mucosal integrity. If that is not properly maintained, you get a condition called as a leaky gut, and which in turn leads to inflammation. Okay, so soluble fiber has got several advantages, and thereby reduces the inflammatory load and keeps your gut also very healthy. But it, of course, unless there are some products, some supplements of soluble fiber, natural foods have a combination of both. And therefore, you get the benefit of both insoluble and soluble fiber.
Wheat is we will say, a whole wheat atta or whole wheat flour. They have not removed the outer layer. So the fiber is intact. So the one that you talked about, both soluble and insoluble fiber is there. How I tell my patient is that if the patient is constipated, the first thing that we say is increase the fiber intake, and that is your insoluble fiber. For example, whole wheat atta will have both the insoluble fiber and the soluble fiber as well. So let's say you make a 90 grams,
you can make roughly 3 chapatis out of 90 grams of whole wheat atta. Right? Yeah. With that.
So 90 grams you can make 3 chapatis.
Yes.
So 3 chapatis, let's say it's around like 2 to 2.5 grams of fiber per chapati. It's around like 7.5 to 8 or even 9 sometimes. And that means almost 33% of the daily fiber requirement.
Yes.
If your criteria is minimum 25 grams of fiber per day.
Yeah.
So why I'm mentioning this point is that when we compare that with cooked white rice, again same 90 to 100 grams, there's only 2 grams of fiber because the outer layer is removed. So that's the most important thing.
Yes.
So when people say that, we have grown up, especially in South India, where we have grown up with white rice, what I tell my patient is that, it is okay to switch. It's not like white rice is bad. It's just that you decrease the amount and you mix it or alternate with other sources like whole wheat atta. So what I do personally as well, that I do 3 to 4 times. I eat whole wheat atta, 2 to 3 rotis at the time. So where I can meet the fiber requirement without thinking too much about how much amount of vegetables and fruits that I'm taking, at least 33% of the time. So this concept of going for other alternative sources compared with the cooked white rice, your take on that?
Yeah. In fact, as South Indians, we have always grown up and we enjoy eating rice. But historically, if you see that polished rice came in somewhere in only after 1960s or so. Most of our traditional rice varieties were either hand pounded or they were unpolished rice, which had the fiber as part of our diet. That habit has completely changed. Now we love rice, the whiter the better. Unfortunately, in a rice grain, the bran, which has the fiber and also micronutrients, gets removed in polishing. So what we are left in a white rice is only starch. And starch, when it gets into our body, gets converted into glucose very quickly. And therefore, our calorie that get into our body is high. And also for diabetic, it is likely to be a disadvantage. Now, we do consume rice along with legumes and other things as well. But the quantity of the rice, it is considerable, that it is bound to increase the glucose levels in our body and also increase the energy intake in our body. Wheat, on the other hand, particularly I mean whole wheat
Whole
atta.
wheat atta.
We have to emphasize on that as whole wheat atta. Quite a lot of wheat is also processed as maida, which again people are very fond of. White bread, parotas and so on made of it. Those do not have this fiber. It's only whole wheat atta has got the entire, which we were again traditionally using. Earlier we didn't have wheat flour coming from the market. We buy the wheat and then take it to the mill and get it powdered and then bring it home. Some people used to sieve the wheat flour to remove some of the dirt, so they lose a little bit of the benefit. Many others don't even do that. So you get the full benefit of the fiber from the bran. So as you said, that if we could only modify our cereal intake marginally, replaced, let us say, either one meal with rice or a part of that meal, let's say your dinner, instead of eating only rice, you eat, let's say, from 2-3 chapatis and a small quantity of rice if you still want it. This would give us the fiber. This will also reduce the glycemic load on our body. And it also gives a little bit of protein as well, because that is coming from the whole wheat atta. So this can be a good kind of modification of a classically South Indian diet, rice-based diet, which will generally be healthy. At the same time, it will also be quite satisfying. So it's not that it's you won't like to eat it.
Yes.
You could eat the same thing, and along with dal, along with curd, it's a healthy meal.
No, I'm a big fan of cooked white rice. Okay, because it is tasty.
Tasty.
It is tasty. I've tried quinoa, I've tried other things, but the taste, I think I grew up with that.
Even brown rice, which has got the fiber, some of people are not accepting it that readily. They do it, but they don't enjoy the meal which has the brown rice. They eat it because they know it's good, but many people don't enjoy because it somehow doesn't blend with the sambar or rasam or whatever.
Correct.
And it is cooking time is more. So it's not sort of replacing white rice. So whereas chapatis seem to be replacing white rice, especially in southern India, people seem to enjoy eating it. So they might as well eat it, provided it is whole wheat atta.
Whole wheat atta, right.
That is what has to be emphasized.
Me as well. So in the US, many people ask me, I'm eating a whole wheat atta because I'm diabetic.
Yeah.
So even for healthy patients, I think the modifying the existing macro intake with decreasing the white rice consumption a little bit, and then replacing that with 3 to 4 times a week of whole wheat atta is what I tell my patients. And I always make sure that my main criteria is fiber. Fiber for a man, I will make sure that for me personally, I eat 38 grams of fiber per day. Minimum. I make sure that for that, this whole wheat atta is helping me without compromising on the taste.
That's right. In fact, our dietary guidelines also says that at least 50% of the cereal which you are taking should come from whole grains. So whole grains means mostly whole wheat atta, or some people consume even millets as alternative cereal. But there again, the acceptability and preparatory issues come inside.
Yes.
Because it doesn't have gluten.
Yes.
So roti making with millets is a challenge. Not everybody does it. Whereas for whole wheat atta, it is an easier thing to do.
Right. So in the US, when I go for grocery shopping, I buy just small packet of Ashirwad atta is something that I do, whole wheat SP. Personally, I've used it. And at the same time, I have also used the millet angle as well. As you said, millet takes a lot of time to be soaked, and the preparation takes a little bit of time. But that also has a good source of fiber.
Yes. It's a very good source of fiber, a lot of micronutrients, and it's considerably low glycemic index, so the sugar spikes are minimized if you add millets to your diet.
So your take on this millet biscuit, millet cake, millet noodles, your take on that?
See, this is actually a very tricky question if you ask me. The reason is, when your basic product, I'll tell you a biscuit, A basic product actually has refined flour. It has sugar. And into that you add a little bit of millet. It doesn't become a healthy option. The basic ingredients which we say you should not take, which is maida and sugar, is still there. So any such things are always okay if instead of no millet biscuit, a millet biscuit is slightly better. But it is not considered as a healthy option. So as only when we increase the content of either whole wheat flour or increase the content of the millet content significantly, for which one has to read the label on these particular things. You see the label and see what percentage of added sugar is there and what percentage of the millet flour or whole wheat flour is added in them. And then use your wisdom to choose the ones rightly. So that is the important aspect. And millets, as such, if one can, use millets as a whole meal itself, then you get actually a better advantage.
In some patients listening to this podcast may think that, hey, we have to have some kind of snacks. And for that, instead of eating like a maida biscuit, I'm giving a millet biscuit for my kid. The problem with that approach is the amount. That is where the problem is. Just because it says millet biscuit doesn't mean that it is a completely healthy thing. And amount is an extremely critical thing. I think more than protein, fiber, carbs and all those things, I think amount
Yes. Portion size is very important.
Is very critical.
So that's why we feel that if there is a biscuit which says is good for diabetic, if it's a normal glucose biscuit, you'll probably eat only 1 or 2 biscuits. If you give me a biscuit which says good for diabetic, I'll eat 4 or 5 because you anyway say it's good for diabetic. But 4 biscuits sugar will add up to that of 2 biscuits of the ordinary biscuit.
Yes.
So that is how hidden you will consume more.
Right.
So you always have to read how much is added sugar. So if you can reduce the added sugar intake through any of these products, see whether they are genuinely healthy, then it's a healthy option. But if you're, examples, if you go to even sweet shops, they sell the peda or any of the gulab jamun saying diabetic friendly. What they do is they replace part of the sugar with a non-nutritive sweetener. But the fat and the oil and the maida is still there. Okay. So we therefore tend to, if you instead of eating 1 gulab jamun, you'll eat 2 or 3 thinking it's anyway good for health because it doesn't have sugar. So healthy options are to be not taken on face value. You have to investigate it yourself and confirm that it's really healthy for you and then consume. Some products are really healthy. Some products claim to be healthy by just mildly replacing good ingredient instead of sugar. That may not be in the long run helpful.
So talking about sugars, the biggest myth that people are talking about is fruits increasing your glycemic levels and causing damage. As a gastroenterologist, we have done a lot of research on fiber and gut health, and it is very clear that the more the fiber, it acts as a prebiotic, and that helps the gut bacteria to produce a short chain fatty acids, and that helps the gut lining, and the gut lining gets connected with the brain, and the brain gut axis is getting stronger. And one of the most important ingredient providing the fiber is the fruits. So I tell my patients that every meal there should be a fruit as a whole and not a juice, so that you get the fiber. Some people are hesitant with that recommendation that, fruits, people think that I've been told that it causes fatty liver, it increases the risk of obesity. Why is that change?
Yeah. Fruits basically do contain sugar. Okay. So they also have fiber. So there is a plus point and a minus point in every fruit. You have to now weigh the relative amount of which fruit has more fiber and less sugar, and which fruit actually has more sugar and less fiber. So you take a banana or a sapota, it will have more sugar and very little fiber. You take, let us say, a papaya or a guava, it will have much more fiber and less of sugar. So what you do is, if you have to eat fruit, You can choose any fruit, but choose the ones which has got more fiber and which got less sugar. So many people, it is almost like vegetable. If you take, for example, we recommend vegetable, right? All vegetables are healthy. But people think potatoes are also vegetables.
Yeah.
And they prefer potatoes. Yeah. But potatoes only starch. It doesn't have much of fiber. And potato is not. The same way fruits also. People think banana is the only fruit. Because banana has its own advantage. It's got high potassium and other things.
Great.
But you have to limit the intake of fruits with less fiber and more sugar and increase the other way around. So it is left to us to choose the right fruit and not think all fruits are same.
What do you recommend, sir?
Actually, especially for diabetics or people who are weight conscious, who want to reduce their sugar intake or liver problem, etc., fruits like guava is the best. Because it's one thing, it's not an exotic, expensive fruit. At the same time, it has got less of your sugar and lot more of fiber. And limit the use of bananas and other things. And even watermelon. Watermelon is one peculiar fruit which actually has a lot of sugar. Okay, so, but 95% of watermelon is water. So contains only 5%. So even if you eat a cup full of watermelon, the amount of actually sugar which is coming is very low. Most of what is coming is water. So that way watermelon is a better fruit.
No, it's the glycemic index also for watermelon may appear like significantly higher.
Yeah, GI is high. GI of watermelon is high. But the GL or the glycemic load, the total sugar which goes into your body is less. So that's why it fills your stomach because of the water. And water anyway is a hydrating thing. The sugar intake is very low.
Correct. And do you, you have become, being a former director of ICMR, you must have seen a silent deficiencies of micronutrient among any population. That is where the concept of fortification came through. And your take on how things have changed compared to before and now.
Yeah. See, micronutrient deficiencies are there in every country. Whether it is a developed country or a developing country, micronutrient deficiency exists. One of the reasons, of course, the food which we consume, we don't consume most of the micronutrient-rich foods. And most of these fast foods and all the kind of easy snacks, etc., have very little micronutrients. And among all the micronutrients, iron is the one which is deficient in a large number of people in our country. The iron deficiency actually got worse in the last 4 years. In the COVID period, before COVID, the prevalence of iron deficiency was maybe around 52%. It went up to 60% or so after COVID. And mostly because people, the kind of food which we eat are not vegetarian food, actually is poor in iron. And many of our food, as you were talking about fiber and phytates and all that, these have got a negative effect on iron bioavailability. So, and many of our foods also contain a lot of tamarind and those kind of, in our sambar or rasam. Those have high phytate level to again inhibit iron absorption.
I see.
And because of that, iron deficiency is prevalent, and therefore we need to give people iron in the form of tablets, therapeutic approach, especially in pregnant women, etc. Because during the time of their pregnancy, we cannot give them only fortified rice because it will take a long time for iron to improve. You have to quickly improve that. So the government gives them this iron, folic acid, B12 tablets. But overall population, if you want population iron intake to improve, we have to provide it by fortification, and the best fortificants are cereals because that is what they eat in large quantities. As I told you, if you fortify milk, half the people don't even drink milk, so it's not going to reach. But everybody will eat rice or everybody will have wheat chapatis. So we fortify the cereals with iron, and iron alone is not sufficient because quite a lot of anemia in our country is not only because of iron deficiency, but also associated with B12 folic acid deficiency. And therefore, it is combined multi-micronutrient fortification. So rice is fortified. And for fortifying rice, the problem with rice is we can't add micronutrient to rice because we wash the rice. When you wash the rice, it will go away, isn't it? So what we do is this broken rice is there. The broken rice is steamed and made soft, and into that the micronutrient is added, and it is extruded through a machine to again produce rice grains. Those are rice grains, what are called as fortified rice kernels, and they contain the iron. So 1 part of that to 99 parts of ordinary rice is blended, and that is given in the public distribution system. So when people eat that rice, whatever is their normal quantity, they get about 1/3 of their daily requirement of iron. It is not too much iron either. So over a period of time, as they keep taking this iron fortified rice, or even in northern India, we are having wheat flour fortified with rice, with iron. So iron and other micronutrients. So the micronutrient deficiencies will have to come down over a period of time when we fortify this. Now, we are also deficient in vitamin A, especially in children, and vitamin D. And so those are fat-soluble vitamins. So the oils are fortified with that. Now, if you buy any cooking oil, you will see fortified with vitamin A and D. Vitamin D doesn't come most to our diets.
Correct.
It only comes from sunlight. And our sunlight exposure has come down tremendously, that almost 80 to 90% of India's population are vitamin D deficient.
Correct.
And we don't even know it.
Right.
And vitamin D also has a role to play in many diseases, including diabetes, heart disease, etc., and osteoporosis. So we have to tell people to take vitamin D as supplements or through this fortification through oils. But even fortification through oils, it may not be able to manage vitamin D deficiency. So we would suggest people to get their vitamin D levels checked and then supplement it. That's one place where we recommend supplements because we are so badly deficient. B12 is another micronutrient which is deficient in vegetarian diets, because B12 comes only from non-vegetarian sources. Again, B12 one needs to fortify or take milk or dairy product through which you can get some amount of B12. So there are these micronutrient deficiencies can be overcome if people take a judicious balanced diet. Adequate milk. For non-vegetarians, take egg or lean meat like fish or chicken, and take cereals which have got whole wheat flour you're talking about. They also have micronutrients like B1, B3, etc. coming from the bran itself. So that kind of a judicious balanced diet will overcome the micronutrient deficiencies. But in terms of, if you say which is the priority deficiency in our country, I would say one, of course, is micronutrient. Number 2 is protein deficiency.
Many young women, I see, they come with low hemoglobin levels.
Correct.
They go to the primary care office, they check the blood, the hemoglobin is low. And in the US, they have this automatic referral to gastroenterology where we analyze for any peptic ulcer disease or any colonic polyp that may be the reason for the anemia. And we end up doing the complete workup, and then finally they say everything is normal. Why is that happening even now? Is it because the food source is not good, or the quality of the food we need to focus more on?
As I said, there are two things. One is whether the intake of iron from our regular food, is it adequate? If it is adequate, then are there any inhibiting factors in our diets, like high phytate content, which is inhibiting that iron absorption? Or do the people have any kind of a hemoglobin disorder itself, which is responsible for the improper synthesis of that? So now we have, the government has a program called Anemia Mukt Bharat, which is Anemia Free India, where it has got multiple interventions, not only fortification, but also the regular health checkup, looking for cause of anemia, and then giving the required anemia, iron deficiency anemia is only 1/3 of the anemia in our country. 2/3 are due to multiple micronutrient deficiency, of which protein deficiency itself is one of the causes for iron not being utilized. If you have inadequate protein, you have inadequate B12 and folate, you give them iron doesn't translate into hemoglobin.
Yes.
Isn't it? So therefore, you need to have an entire package.
So it'll have to be like a comprehensive package. And you have been working with ICMR and you have put some guidelines before. Recent ICMR guidelines for India, they have pretty much came across and then told that, hey, we are eating a lot of carbs. 62% of our calorie intake is mainly carbs, and that could be related to that increased non-communicable diseases that we are seeing. Was this the practice or was the pattern that was existed when you were a former director, 5 to 10 years ago?
Yeah, we have been seeing a steady increase in diabetes in this country. See, I came up from this Chennai only, and I was in graduate at Stanley Medical College. At that time, when one of my professors wanted to start a diabetic clinic, the government asked him there's no need because the prevalence of diabetes at the time was barely 1.5 to 2%. But that professor anticipated that as time goes on, this diabetes is going to increase. And therefore, we are one of the first institutions in the city to have a diabetic screening clinic.
Wow.
Because there was a progressive decrease in physical activity. And a progressive consumption of refined carbohydrates. And both these things drove this NCD epidemic in our country. And therefore, we are now trying to see that we can, that is where questions like whole wheat, millet, etc. is coming in, is to reduce the load of refined carbohydrates. And refined carbohydrates, of course, include even sugar and jaggery and maida and all these kind of things, which are very popular.
Jaggery is a refined carbohydrate.
No, jaggery is sugar.
Sugar.
And it's the same form of sugar. Because that's one more myth. People think that if I can't eat sugar, I can take jaggery, which is wrong. Jaggery also gives the same glucose load as sugar does. Maybe it's got a small bit of fiber in that, but that doesn't make it any better than sugar.
Amount matters.
In fact, there are many food products now they promote saying no sugar added, only jaggery. That doesn't make any difference. That's also sugar.
Right.
Okay. So, but people sort of get carried away by those kind of things. But and therefore, many of these refined carbohydrate intakes started going up. And parallelly, physical activity came down. Our ancestors did consume a lot of white rice or refined carbs, etc. But they didn't have this problem because they are physically very active. The physical activity levels have come down so low. If, for example, if you see the calorie consumption when you're sleeping, let us say it is 1, a factor of 1.
Okay.
How much calorie is a person consuming when he's awake? You're consuming only 1.2. So our calorie consumption or physical activity between sleeping and wake hours is barely 20% more. So that is how low calories we are burning, but we are consuming these refined calories. But same thing if you were to replace with complex carbohydrates, you will still have a calorie intake. I'm not saying calories will disappear, it will be there. But the rate at which it enters the body will be slower, and that will help the body's metabolism to manage them much better. So this is a very complex thing, and then this happened over the last 30, 40 years. And then you see that ICMR India study, which Dr. Mohan and his group have shown clearly the prevalence all over. It is quite alarming. So we all have to, educate people to use the right kind of foods and avoid the ones which are increasing
this epidemic. Yeah. It was a wonderful, wonderful discussion, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if you have to leave a last message to the people listening to the podcast, what will that be?
I think people should, number one is read labels, food labels. Once you start that, you can choose the right kind of food. And second, go back to traditional kind of our foods, region-specific kind of food, whatever your ancestors were eating, try to get back to that. Prefer home-cooked food to getting food from outside. And make sure you're physically active. Whatever is possible within your own physical limitation, be active. Even if you're an elderly who cannot move out of the house, you could still do a little bit of physical activity inside your homes. Any bit of physical activity is good than no physical activity. Avoid sitting for long periods of time. And these are some of the simple
Important
things
points,
people can apply and then feel better.
Super, sir. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.